America's largest cities are turning into ghost towns due to the homeless crisis you don't know. Did you know that in 2024, America's homelessness crisis has reached historic levels? Over 770,000 people are now without a home, a staggering 18% increase from the previous year, marking the most dramatic surge in U.S. history. Major cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York are witnessing an unsettling transformation. Once thriving downtowns are now lined with endless rows of tents, businesses are shutting down, and entire streets are filled with those who have nowhere else to go. So, what's really happening? Has the American dream turned into a nightmare? In this video, The Journey of Wisdom uncovers the shocking truth behind why America's largest cities are turning into ghost towns due to the homelessness crisis. Stay with us until the end. What you're about to discover may leave you speechless. Number 1. San Francisco. San Francisco, once the crown jewel of the West Coast, symbolized ambition, progress, and the boundless possibilities of the American dream. A city where innovators and visionaries gathered to reshape the future, where the streets were alive with creativity, and where the skyline reflected the triumphs of the tech revolution. The Golden Gate stood as a gateway not just to opportunity, but to a new world shaped by technology and innovation. Yet, like all things in life, change is inevitable, and today, San Francisco finds itself at a crossroads, struggling with economic shifts that have altered its very essence. For years, the presence of tech giants like Twitter, Salesforce, and Meta made the city a hub of wealth, attracting talent from across the globe and fueling an era of unprecedented prosperity. But prosperity, when not rooted in sustainability, is fleeting. According to a 2023 CB Office report, office vacancy rates have surged to a record-breaking 34%, leaving behind towering glass buildings that now stand as hollow monuments of a bygone era. The transition to remote work, accelerated by the pandemic, proved to be a turning point. Companies realized they no longer needed expensive office spaces in one of the priciest cities in the world, and as they withdrew, they took with them tens of thousands of high-paying jobs and billions of dollars in economic activity. The bustling downtown that once thrived on the energy of tech workers now feels eerily quiet, as if the pulse of the city has slowed to a whisper. This shift has sent shockwaves through the local economy, revealing just how interwoven businesses are in the fabric of a community. Cafes that once overflowed with engineers discussing the next big innovation now sit vacant, their doors permanently shut. Family-run restaurants that served generations of workers have been forced to close. Grocery stores that once catered to thriving neighborhoods now face dwindling foot traffic, their shelves stocked for customers who no longer come. When the flow of money stops, the ripple effect is undeniable. What was once a booming economy can, almost overnight, transform into a landscape of scarcity. The Buddhist teaching of impermanence reminds us that nothing is forever, everything is subject to change. This truth is unfolding in real time in San Francisco, forcing both businesses and individuals to adapt or be left behind. But the challenges go deeper than empty offices and struggling businesses. The city's homelessness crisis has reached an all-time high, with over 7,750 people living on the streets, making it one of the highest per capita homelessness rates in the nation. Entire neighborhoods have become makeshift tent cities, occupied by those who have nowhere else to turn. The sight of individuals struggling with addiction and poverty has become an undeniable reality, a stark contrast to the city's once glittering image of success. The wisdom of the Buddha teaches us that true wealth is not measured by possessions, but by the well-being of a community. And in this regard, San Francisco faces an urgent moral and economic question. How can a city that once embodied prosperity now house so many who have lost everything? To compound the crisis, organized retail theft has become rampant, with coordinated groups storming stores in broad daylight, clearing shelves and vanishing within minutes. Even major retailers like Walgreens, Nordstrom and Whole Foods have been forced to permanently close their locations, unable to sustain operations amidst rising crime and security concerns. It's a stark reminder that financial abundance is not just about wealth, but about stability, trust, and the ability to sustain growth. When lawlessness prevails, when businesses flee, and when people no longer feel safe, a city risks unraveling from within. The question remains, can San Francisco rise again, or is it destined to become a cautionary tale of what happens when prosperity is not built on a solid foundation? Perhaps the answers lie in understanding that true abundance is not just about money, but about balance, sustainability, and community. As Lao Tzu once said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. For San Francisco, and for anyone facing financial uncertainty, that first step is recognizing the impermanence of fortune and embracing the mindset that true prosperity is built not just on wealth, but on resilience, adaptability, and a commitment to lifting others along the way. The road ahead may be uncertain, but every challenge presents an opportunity for renewal. What matters is how we respond. Number 2, Chicago. Chicago, once a beacon of opportunity and the beating heart of the Midwest, now finds itself at a crossroads. The city that once stood as a symbol of resilience, innovation, and ambition is slowly unraveling, as more and more residents pack their bags and leave behind the place they once called home. Between 2020 and 2022, over 81,000 people fled the Windy City, a stark reminder that something is deeply wrong. Once thriving neighborhoods are now eerily quiet, with abandoned homes and shuttered businesses painting a picture of a city in distress. But why is this happening? One of the biggest reasons is the crushing burden of property taxes. Chicago's property tax rate, at over 2%, is nearly double the national average, making it increasingly unaffordable for middle-class families to stay. As the cost of living continues to rise, long-time residents are finding themselves unable to keep up, forced to make heartbreaking decisions about their futures. Streets once filled with laughter and community events now feel empty, stripped of the very soul that made them special. Even O'Hare International Airport, once a bustling hub of travel and possibility, has become a symbol of Chicago's struggles. Where jet-setters once hurried to catch their flights, many now find themselves sharing space with the homeless, seeking shelter in the terminal's empty corners. Airport businesses are closing earlier, not because of a lack of travelers, but due to safety concerns, as crime and instability creep into every aspect of daily life. Take Samuel Rivera, a 68-year-old retired mechanic who spent decades working in Chicago's industrial sector. He devoted his life to his city, working tirelessly to provide for his family and securing a home he paid off 20 years ago. But now, I worked hard my whole life, paid my taxes, raised my family, but now I can't even afford to keep the house I paid off. Every year I feel like the city is pushing me out. Samuel's story is not unique. Thousands of hard-working individuals, the very backbone of this city, are being forced out by financial pressures they never anticipated. For many, life in Chicago has turned into a daily battle for survival, with once vibrant communities slowly fading into the past. It has held on to policies, structures, and financial demands that are no longer sustainable, and now everything is spilling over. The growing homelessness crisis, rising crime, and economic decline are symptoms of a city struggling to hold on to an outdated way of functioning. But what if, instead of clinging to what no longer works, the city could learn to let go of ineffective policies, rethink its approach, and create a future where both prosperity and compassion coexist? This is where we must ask ourselves the tough questions. How did a city, once filled with opportunity, become a place people feel forced to leave? How do we balance economic growth with the well-being of all citizens? And, most importantly, what role do we play in ensuring our communities remain places of hope rather than despair? Chicago's struggles are not just about taxes or politics. They are about people. They are about families like Samuel's, who worked their whole lives only to feel abandoned by the place they helped build. They are about the homeless individual seeking shelter in places never meant for them, a reminder that society's problems do not disappear just because we choose to look away. The lesson here is clear. When a city prioritizes wealth over well-being, when it clings to policies that push people out rather than lift them up, it will inevitably begin to crumble. But there is always a choice. Just as the monk taught, peace and prosperity do not come from hoarding or controlling. They come from wisdom, balance, and knowing when to change. If Chicago wants to reclaim its place as a city of opportunity, it must learn this lesson before it is too late. The real question is, will it? Number 3. Los Angeles. Los Angeles, the city of angels, has long been a place where dreams are woven into the fabric of its golden skyline, where ambition and luxury dance beneath the swaying palm trees. It is a city of million-dollar mansions, sleek supercars, and rooftop lounges, where cocktails cost more than an average family's weekly groceries. Yet, beneath the glitz and glamour, a different Los Angeles emerges, one that often goes unseen by the millions who come chasing fame and fortune. Behind the shimmering facade of Hollywood, hidden in the shadows of towering skyscrapers, lies the reality of a city struggling with the weight of its own success. A city where wealth and poverty exist side by side, yet are worlds apart. While bright billboards illuminate the streets, casting promises of a better life, more than 75,000 people in Los Angeles have no roof over their heads, forced to find shelter in alleys, beneath bridges, and on sidewalks that were never meant to be homes. Just blocks away from the glitzy entertainment hubs, downtown Los Angeles reveals a heartbreaking contrast. Skid Row, a sprawling neighborhood of despair, where over 4,000 individuals live in makeshift tents stitched together with whatever scraps they can find. These are people who once had jobs, dreams, and families, but somewhere along the way they were left behind by a system that values success but struggles to provide second chances. By day they search for food, collecting recyclables for pennies, while by night they huddle under thin blankets, trying to escape the chill, the hunger, and the ever-present fear of violence. The city's wealth is so close, yet so unreachable, and for many, the American dream has become a distant mirage. But what does it say about a city when its response to homelessness is not compassion, but avoidance? In an effort to drive away those who have nowhere else to go, Los Angeles has resorted to playing classical music, Beethoven, Mozart, on loop in subway stations and public spaces, not to inspire or uplift, but to unsettle, to disrupt sleep, to make it unbearable for the unhoused to stay. Instead of investing in lasting solutions, the city drowns out suffering with melodies meant to remind them that they are unwelcome. Is this the price of progress? As home prices soar to nearly $1 million, gas prices climb higher than anywhere else in the nation, and taxes continue to rise, even the middle class is being pushed out. Hollywood, once the beating heart of Los Angeles, is also beginning to fade. Major film studios are leaving, relocating to states with lower taxes and fewer regulations, leaving behind vacant lots and a workforce scrambling for opportunities that no longer exist. What happens when the industry that built the city begins to abandon it? Can a city survive when it prioritizes luxury for the few over the well-being of the many? The Buddha once said, "Thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared." What if, instead of treating the homeless as a burden, Los Angeles embraced the idea that abundance is not just about wealth, but about uplifting those who have fallen? A city is only as strong as the compassion it shows to its weakest members. So, we must ask ourselves, is Los Angeles still the land of opportunity, or has it become a city where dreams are only for those who can afford them? And more importantly, if the true measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable, what does Los Angeles say about the future of the American dream? Let us know your thoughts. Number 4. New York City. New York City, once the very embodiment of the American dream, now finds itself at the crossroads of prosperity and despair. It was the city where ambition reached for the sky, where the streets buzzed with opportunity, and where millions believed that hard work could turn dreams into reality. Today, the lights of Times Square still shine, and the billboards still boast luxury brands. But just beyond this dazzling display lies a stark and heartbreaking contrast. On the cold pavement outside high-end storefronts, a man clutches a cardboard sign that reads, "Once just a dream, now just a meal." His eyes, hollow with exhaustion, scan the endless sea of passers-by, yet no one stops. His story, like so many others, fades into the background of a city that was once known for never forgetting anyone. According to the New York City Department of Homeless Services, nearly 90,000 people seek refuge in shelters every night, while thousands more remain invisible, huddled beneath subway platforms, curled up in abandoned doorways, or tucked away in makeshift encampments. This is not just a statistic, it is a crisis that has spiraled into the highest level of homelessness since the Great Depression. The Coalition for the Homeless reports that shelters are overrun, and the streets have become the last resort for those who have slipped through the cracks of an unforgiving system. But what makes this situation even more alarming is not just the number of people affected, but the broader implications it carries. In Midtown Manhattan, businesses are not shutting down because customers have vanished, but because their storefronts have transformed into encampments. The sidewalks, once filled with eager shoppers and tourists, now resemble scenes of despair. Rows of makeshift shelters, scattered belongings, and individuals who, despite the world's gaze, remain unseen. Step off the subway, and reality hits even harder. Beneath the city's towering skyline, dozens of people gather around steam grates, clinging to whatever warmth they can find as another brutal night sets in. Central Park, a place once synonymous with romance and tranquility, now houses a growing community of those who have nowhere else to turn. Cardboard homes and tarp-covered shelters dot the landscape, each one telling a silent story of hardship, loss, and abandonment. This is no longer just a housing crisis. It is the unraveling of the promise that built this city, the slow erosion of the dream that once lured people from every corner of the world. When the streets of a city become a battleground for survival, when prosperity and poverty exist side by side yet remain worlds apart, it forces us to ask, what is happening to the American dream? The homelessness crisis is not simply an issue of policy failure or economic downturns. It reflects a deeper, systemic problem that society can no longer ignore. Skyrocketing rent prices, stagnant wages, the lack of affordable housing, and the rising cost of living have turned what was once a temporary setback into a seemingly permanent state for many. But this is not just about New York City. It is about every major American metropolis facing the same reality. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, where the streets tell the same story of displacement and despair. This is a moment that demands action, not just from leaders and lawmakers, but from all of us. The solution is not simple, but it starts with awareness, compassion, and the willingness to see the unseen. It starts with policies that prioritize affordable housing, mental health services, and economic opportunities that prevent people from slipping into the abyss in the first place. So, what does this say about the pulse of the American dream? Has it faded into history, or does it still have a chance to survive? Before we move on to another city once hailed as the beacon of hope but now drowning in crisis, we want to hear from you. What do you think is the real cause of this epidemic, and what can be done to turn things around? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you've watched up to this point, you're already taking the first step in understanding the hidden reality behind America's growing ghost towns. Comment below with "Urban Crisis" to show you're aware and ready to be part of the conversation. Don't look away now. There's still so much to uncover about the homelessness crisis and its impact on our cities. Stay until the end to grasp the full picture and what it means for all of us. Number 5. Portland. Portland was once a city celebrated for its natural beauty, creative energy, and strong sense of community. But today, it's facing a crisis that is impossible to ignore. Homelessness is reshaping the very identity of the city. According to the Portland State University Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative, over 6,600 people in Portland are homeless on any given night. That means roughly 1 in every 165 residents is living without shelter, a staggering and heartbreaking reality that reflects a deeper issue. Entire neighborhoods that once bustled with life are now lined with makeshift tents, spreading under bridges, along sidewalks, and even into parks that were once places of leisure and gathering. These encampments are not just an eyesore. They are the result of real human suffering, stories of struggle, and a system that seems to be failing its most vulnerable citizens. The effects of this crisis ripple far beyond those directly impacted by homelessness. Businesses in downtown Portland, once a thriving economic hub, are shutting down. Storefronts stand empty, and streets that were once filled with locals and tourists now feel abandoned. Many residents, feeling a growing sense of insecurity, are choosing to leave the city altogether. But behind every statistic and every shuttered business is a human story, one of loss, resilience, and often unimaginable hardship. For some, homelessness is the result of skyrocketing housing costs and job loss. For others, it's tied to mental health struggles, addiction, or domestic violence. The numbers paint a stark picture. Portland's Office of General Homeless Services reports that 30% of the homeless population are women, with nearly half of them having survived domestic violence. The crisis also disproportionately affects communities of color, with African Americans and other minorities making up nearly 39% of the homeless population, despite being a much smaller percentage of the overall city. But this is not just an economic failure, it's a profound social crisis. It raises urgent questions. Why is a city with so many resources unable to provide adequate shelter and support? How did Portland reach this breaking point? And most importantly, what can be done to restore hope and dignity to those living on the streets? There are no simple answers, but one thing is clear: ignoring the problem is not an option. If we continue to look away, the crisis will only deepen, further unraveling the fabric of the city. Real change requires action. Policies that address affordable housing, mental health care and social services, but also a shift in how we see and treat the homeless. These are not just statistics, they are people, human beings with stories, struggles, and the hope of a better future. So the question is, what role do we play in making that future possible? What small steps can each of us take to create a city that offers not just survival, but dignity for all? Number 6. Detroit. Detroit, once the crown jewel of American industry, was more than just a city, it was the embodiment of the American dream. This was the birthplace of the automobile revolution, where titans like Ford, General Motors and Chrysler not only built cars, but also fueled an era of prosperity that rippled across the nation. At its peak, Detroit was an unstoppable force, producing nearly 90% of America's automobiles and swelling with a population of over 1,800,000 people who thrived in strong communities, held stable jobs, and embraced the promise of a better future. But history has a way of humbling even the greatest of giants, and Detroit's fall was as dramatic as its rise. As globalization and automation reshaped the economy, the very industry that made the city prosper began to crumble. Factories shuttered, thousands of jobs disappeared overnight, and families were forced to leave in search of new opportunities. By the early 2000s, Detroit was on life support, and in 2013 it became the largest American city to declare bankruptcy, drowning under an unimaginable $18.5 billion debt. Yet, this wasn't just a financial crisis. It was the unraveling of a city's identity. The once vibrant streets, alive with the energy of hard-working families, are now eerily quiet. Entire neighborhoods sit abandoned, their homes standing as hollowed-out shells of a past life, windows shattered, doors clinging to rusted hinges, and wild vegetation overtaking what was once a thriving community. The iconic factories, which once symbolized innovation and progress, now loom as rusting monuments to a forgotten era. James Walker, a retired auto worker who has lived in Detroit his entire life, still struggles to accept the reality of his hometown's decline. "I remember when Detroit had a pulse, when people walked these streets with pride," he says, his voice carrying the weight of nostalgia and sorrow. "Now, it's like the heart of the city has stopped beating, and we're just waiting for something, anything, to bring it back to life." But can a city truly die, or is there always a path to renewal? The Buddha once taught, "Nothing is permanent, everything is subject to change. Being is always becoming." Perhaps Detroit is not a ghost town, but a city in transition, waiting for its rebirth. What does it take to bring a city back from the brink? Is it investment, leadership, or the sheer resilience of its people? As we explore the downfall of America's greatest cities, one question lingers. Are we witnessing the end, or is this the beginning of something new? Number 7. Baltimore. Baltimore, once a beacon of American industry and innovation, now teeters on the edge of collapse, a stark reminder of how quickly prosperity can fade when a city's foundation is neglected. For decades, the city's harbor thrived as a vital economic engine, where cargo ships lined the docks and blue-collar workers built their futures with sweat and determination. Its skyline, adorned with cranes and towering steel structures, symbolized resilience and opportunity. But today, that vision feels like a distant dream, overtaken by a reality that grows grimmer with each passing year. The infrastructure that once held the city together is now on the verge of breaking apart. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, 4% of all bridges in the United States are over 50 years old, and in Baltimore, many of these structures are deteriorating at an alarming rate. Despite billions of dollars flowing into the city's tax revenue, streets remain riddled with potholes, entire neighborhoods are falling into disrepair, and public services struggle to keep up with the growing crisis. The once bustling streets now resemble scenes from a post-apocalyptic movie, blocks of abandoned homes, shattered windows, and eerie silence replacing the hum of a once thriving community. This decline isn't just about aging roads or crumbling buildings. It's about a city losing its soul. As industries relocate, factories shut their doors, and job opportunities dwindle, the lifeblood of Baltimore slowly drains away. Those who spent their lives working to build this city now find themselves wandering through a landscape of neglect. Take John Carter, a former dock worker who dedicated over 6 years to the industry that once thrived here. "I gave this city everything I had," he says, gazing at the empty buildings that once bustled with workers. "Now, I walk past them, and it's like they were never even here." John's story is not unique. It echoes through the lives of thousands of residents who feel abandoned by the very system they helped sustain. Their struggle isn't just about losing jobs or deteriorating infrastructure. It's about witnessing the slow erosion of their home, their identity, and their hope for the future. Yet this crisis is not inevitable. The fate of Baltimore, like that of many American cities facing similar struggles, hinges on whether leadership and community efforts can come together to reverse the decay. Cities are living entities. They thrive when nurtured and wither when ignored. Investment in infrastructure, job creation, and urban renewal isn't just about fixing roads or repairing buildings. It's about restoring faith in a city that still has the potential to rise again. But the question remains, will Baltimore find a way to rebuild, or will it slip further into the abyss of forgotten cities? This is a challenge that extends beyond just one place. It is a warning to the rest of the country. If cities as historic and resilient as Baltimore can fall, so can others. It is a wake-up call for communities to push for accountability, demand real solutions, and work together to restore the strength of their cities before it's too late. What do you think? Can Baltimore reclaim its former glory, or is it destined to become another name on the growing list of American ghost towns? Let us know your thoughts before we move on to another city grappling with the same tragic decline. Number 8. St. Louis. St. Louis was once a city of opportunity, a place where hard work and determination built fortunes and created thriving communities. Nestled along the Mississippi River, it stood as a gateway for commerce, welcoming industries that shaped America's economic strength. Immigrants arrived with hopes of a better future, and companies like Budweiser, McDonnell Douglas, and Boeing turned this city into a powerhouse of innovation. It was a symbol of the American dream, where steel, sweat, and ambition forged a future of prosperity. But today that dream is slipping away. The factories that once roared with production now stand silent, their windows shattered, their once busy doors rusting shut. Streets that were once full of life now echo with an eerie stillness. Whole neighborhoods sit abandoned, with boarded-up homes and weeds pushing through cracked sidewalks. The city that once thrived with nearly 856,000 residents in the 1950s has dwindled to just over 300,000 today. And the decline is more than just numbers. It's a reflection of deeper struggles. The crisis facing St. Louis isn't just about empty buildings. It's about people, those who have been left behind, struggling to make ends meet in a city where opportunities have dried up, jobs have vanished, public services are crumbling, and poverty has tightened its grip. When an economy collapses, it doesn't just take businesses with it. It takes schools, hospitals, and entire communities. For many, the choice is either to leave in search of something better or to stay and fight against a system that seems to be failing them. But what happens when even staying feels impossible? Property values have plummeted, yet the cost of living continues to climb, leaving those who remain trapped in an impossible paradox, unable to afford to stay but also unable to leave. For retirees living on fixed incomes, the city they once called home has become an unforgiving place, where safety, stability, and dignity are no longer guaranteed. This is the reality of St. Louis today, and it forces us to ask an urgent question: how did we get here? Is this just the natural evolution of cities, or is there something deeper at play, something that can still be changed? St. Louis is not alone in this struggle. Across America, once great cities are fighting to stay alive in the face of economic collapse, rising homelessness, and social decay. But does it have to be this way? Can we rebuild what has been lost? Or are we watching the slow death of a city with no way to stop it? The fate of St. Louis is not just a local issue. It's a warning to every city facing similar challenges. If we fail to address the root causes, economic instability, lack of opportunity, and failing infrastructure, more cities will follow the same path. But within every challenge there is also a lesson. St. Louis reminds us that no city, no community is immune to decline. It shows us that when we ignore the struggles of our most vulnerable, when we allow industries to leave without investing in what remains, we create ghost towns out of once thriving places. However, it also teaches us that change is possible, if we care enough to fight for it. The question is, will we? Will we find ways to restore the economic heartbeat of these cities, to invest in communities, to create new opportunities where old ones have faded? Or will we continue to watch as more places become silent echoes of what they once were? The answer is up to us. If you're still watching, you're one of the few who truly want to understand what's happening in our cities. Comment "Save Our Cities" if you see the urgent need for change. There's more to this crisis than meets the eye. Stay until the end to uncover the deeper truth and what it means for our future. Number 9. Seattle. Seattle, once a city that symbolized progress, innovation, and the American dream, is now facing a crisis that few could have predicted. This is the birthplace of tech giants like Amazon and Microsoft, the home of Starbucks, and a city that once flourished with bustling streets, thriving businesses, and an energy that inspired entrepreneurs from all over the world. But beneath the sleek skyline and the booming tech industry, a different reality is unfolding. One of struggling families, empty storefronts, and a growing sense of abandonment. The question is, how did a city so full of promise start to feel like it's slowly becoming a ghost town? One of the biggest factors driving this shift is taxation. With Seattle's sales tax sitting at over 9%, the cost of living and doing business in the city has become unbearable for many. While large corporations have the resources to weather economic storms, small businesses, the heart and soul of the city, are finding it impossible to survive. The burden of high taxes combined with skyrocketing rents and operational costs is pushing long-time business owners to the brink. But taxes alone aren't the only challenge. Rising crime and homelessness have created an environment where even the most resilient business owners are finding it hard to stay afloat. As crime rates increase, stores experience more theft, vandalism, and security concerns. For some, it's not just about financial loss, it's about feeling unsafe in a city they once loved. David Rodriguez, a Seattle native, understands this all too well. For more than 30 years, he ran a small family-owned bookstore in Capitol Hill, a place where generations of readers gathered, shared ideas, and built a sense of community. But in 2023, he was forced to close his doors. This bookstore was more than just a business, David said, his voice filled with sorrow. It was a place where people came together. But how can you run a store when every morning you step over people sleeping at your doorstep, when theft becomes a daily occurrence, and when your hard-earned money goes more to taxes and security than to growing your dream? David's story is not unique. It's a reflection of a larger trend, where long-time residents and business owners are packing up and leaving, unable to sustain their livelihoods in a city that seems to be slipping through their fingers. But this isn't just about businesses closing. The ripple effect is being felt everywhere. Jobs are disappearing. Neighborhoods that were once lively are now marked by boarded-up windows, and a sense of loss hangs in the air. When small businesses vanish, they don't just take jobs with them. They take a sense of community, a shared space where people connected, exchanged ideas, and built relationships. The disappearance of these spaces leaves a void that is hard to fill. So, what happens when a city starts losing the very people and businesses that made it vibrant in the first place? What does it mean for the future of Seattle? The growing homelessness crisis adds another layer to this unfolding tragedy. Thousands of people struggling with addiction, mental illness, and financial hardship have been left with nowhere to turn. Without effective policies to address these deep-rooted issues, the streets have become their only home, turning once thriving districts into places of despair. And while some argue that businesses should adapt and show more compassion, others wonder how much longer they can hold on before they too are forced to leave. The Buddha once said, "Just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life." Perhaps what we're witnessing isn't just an economic decline, but a deeper loss. A loss of connection, of purpose, of the values that once held the city together. So where does Seattle go from here? Can the city find a way to support both its struggling residents and its business owners? Can leaders step up to restore safety, affordability, and hope? Or will more streets turn silent, more businesses shut their doors, and more families leave behind the place they once called home. The answers aren't simple, but the future of Seattle depends on them. The real question is, what happens when the soul of a city starts to fade, and is there still time to bring it back? Number 10. Philadelphia. Philadelphia, once the proud birthplace of American democracy and a symbol of freedom, now finds itself at a crossroads, struggling under the weight of a crisis that has turned entire neighborhoods into ghost towns. The city that once stood as a beacon of opportunity, where the Liberty Bell rang in celebration of independence, now faces a reality where hope is fading, and streets once filled with life are now lined with abandoned buildings and shattered storefronts. The city's heart beats quieter these days as businesses shut their doors, longtime residents leave, and the streets fill with those who have nowhere else to turn. The homelessness crisis in Philadelphia is not just about numbers. It is a deep and growing wound that touches every part of the city, stripping away its identity and leaving in its place a sense of loss that lingers in the empty sidewalks and darkened alleyways. With more than 5,700 people experiencing homelessness on any given night, Philadelphia's struggle is not an isolated issue. It is a reflection of a larger problem spreading across America's largest cities. The sight of tents lining sidewalks, individuals sleeping in doorways, and entire blocks overtaken by despair is becoming disturbingly common. But this is not just a story about homelessness. It is about the slow erosion of economic stability, the decay of communities, and the growing sense of uncertainty about the future. As poverty tightens its grip, the ripple effect is undeniable. Businesses can no longer survive, crime rises, and those who can afford to leave do so, further draining the city of its strength and resilience. What was once a place where hard-working families built their futures is now a city where even survival feels like an uphill battle. Beyond the hardest-hit areas like Kensington, the struggles extend throughout the city. Philadelphia now holds the highest poverty rate among the 10 largest cities in the United States, standing at a staggering 23%. For those already living paycheck to paycheck, the rising cost of living and lack of affordable housing push them ever closer to the brink. The American dream, which once promised prosperity to those willing to work for it, has become an illusion for many. The harsh truth is that in a city with such deep historical roots, the foundation that once held it together is cracking under the weight of modern economic and social pressures. When entire streets become unlivable, when small businesses collapse, and when people feel unsafe in their own neighborhoods, what remains of the community that once thrived? The question is, how did it come to this? While many factors contribute to the crisis, from economic downturns to policy failures, one thing is clear. If solutions are not found soon, Philadelphia's decline will only deepen. The time for ignoring these issues has passed. Cities across the nation must learn from Philadelphia's struggles, recognizing that homelessness is not just an individual issue, but a societal one. It requires collective action, affordable housing initiatives, economic revitalization, and stronger community support systems. Without these, more cities will follow the same path, watching their history fade into the background as their streets become unrecognizable. For those who still believe in the promise of America, now is the time to act, before the echoes of the past are all that remain. As we've explored, the growing homelessness crisis is reshaping some of America's largest cities, turning once thriving communities into places of struggle and uncertainty. But this isn't just about abandoned buildings and rising crime. It's about real people, real lives, and a system that needs urgent reform. The future of these cities isn't set in stone. Change is possible, but it requires awareness, action, and the willingness to find solutions that prioritize both economic stability and human dignity. The question now is, will we learn from this crisis, or will we continue to watch as more communities fade into history? We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think is the real cause of this crisis, and what can be done to turn things around? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Journey of Wisdom. Turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming videos as we continue to explore the deeper truths shaping our world today. Until next time, stay mindful, stay informed, and let's work together to build a better future.